In the last video, series 13, we discussed two working capital finance products, namely cash credit hypothecation of book debts and cash credit hypothecation of stocks cum book debts. In this video, let us understand the concept of bill financing. Bill financing is also a post-sale working capital credit facility. We have learned that the two main functions of a bank are investment in the capital market and granting loans and advances. In addition to these two activities, bank also offer a number of services to its customers and earn a fee called either as commission or discount. Today, let us understand the concept of bill financing. Before going into the details of bill financing, we need to understand one of the services provided by bank, namely bill collection services. We also need to understand the documents that are required in case of a bill collection service. Let us first understand the bill collection service. I will explain this with an example. Suppose there is a manufacturer of a product in Bangalore. There is a buyer for that product in Chennai. Both seller and buyer would like to enter into a trading transactions. However, the seller is not willing to part with the stock of goods until he receives the payment for the goods sold. Similarly, the buyer in Chennai is not willing to make payment unless he receives the stocks of goods. In such cases, the banks act as an intermediary between the seller and the buyer. I will just explain this in a very simple example. There are some documents which the seller hands over to the seller's bank. The seller's bank sends these documents to the buyer's bank. The buyer's bank sent an intimation to the buyer asking him to come and make payment for the goods sent by the seller. The buyer goes to his bank, makes the payment. The buyer's bank hands over the document. These documents help the buyer in collecting the stock either from the lorry company or from the railways. The buyer's bank sends the money to the seller's bank. The seller's bank gives the money to the seller. Here, both the banks do not extend any credit facility. So naturally, both the banks cannot charge interest. For the services which they have provided, they collect a fee called bank charges or commission or discount. This income by way of commission or bank charges appear in the other income of the bank's profit and loss account statement. Now, let us understand the documents that are needed for the bill collection service. There are three documents, namely the invoice, the transport document and bill of exchange. There will also be a covering letter. The covering letter indicates the bank through which the payment to be collected from the buyer, the time permitted by the seller to the buyer to make payment, the interest to be charged in case of delayed payment, etc. The covering letter is prepared by the seller and the same is handed over to the seller's bank. The seller's bank and the buyer's bank strictly follow the instructions given by the seller. The three documents which are needed are, one is the invoice. Invoice contains the details of the goods sent, the total quantity of the goods sent, the unit selling rate, and the total amount payable including the taxes. It is addressed to the buyers. The second one is the transport document. When the buyer gives an order, the seller transports the goods to the buyer's place through a lorry or through railways. The seller hands over the goods to the lorry company and gets a receipt called lorry receipts. Or if the instruction is to send it through railways, the seller transports the goods to the railways department and collects a receipt called railway receipts. The buyer needs these documents to take possession of the documents in Chennai. So the third one is the bill of exchange. The bill of exchange is nothing but a negotiable instrument. It is an order given by the seller to the buyer to make payment to a third person. In a bill of exchange, there are three parties. One is the seller, who is also called the drawer of the bill of exchange, and the buyer, who is also called as the drawee of the bill of exchange, and the payee. The payee in the instant case is the bank. Now, the bill of exchange will be drawn in the name of the seller and it will be endorsed in the name of the seller's bank. Similarly, the lorry receipt or the railway receipt will be in the name of the seller, which will be endorsed to the seller's bank. The seller's bank in turn endorses the bill of exchange and the transport document in the name of the buyer's bank. The documents will be sent by the seller's bank to the buyer's bank. The buyer's bank sends an intimation to the buyer having received these documents. The documents contain the invoice, the transport document, that is the lorry receipt or the railway receipt, and the bill of exchange. The buyer comes to the bank, makes payment and collects the documents, which includes the lorry receipts and the railway receipts. Now, having received the lorry receipts and the railway receipts, the buyer can lift the goods either from the lorry company or from the railways. The buyer's bank in turn transfers the fund to the seller's bank. The seller's bank in turn transfers the fund to the seller's account. Both the seller's bank and the buyer's bank collect the bank charges, which is shared or not shared, which will be based on the instruction given by the seller in his covering letter. In case you have understood the bill collection service and the underlying documents, press the like button and subscribe to this channel. In the next video, series 15, we shall be discussing how the bill financing works in the bank. Thank you very much.